Pete, welcome to the podcast, man. Good to have you.
What's up, Brian? Your
So
studio is way cooler than mine.
I appreciate that. You got a nice look. You got depth back there. I can see. You
Yeah,
got depth.
we'll
So
have like some sales reps running around the background.
yeah.
Hopefully
So
not.
like
They
the
should be at their desk
yes.
selling.
You're like on the back of you ever see like I'm trying to remember it was the one, was it Mad TV or Saturday Night Live where like the reporter and then like they were in the background kind of doing all like the I don't know, trying to
All
all
the
the
things.
things
I feel that that was like a go-to kind of like a go-to trope,
back
visual
in the day.
trope there.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to have you on. I know we caught up. Was it Brian Wish? I think connected
Hmm.
us back
That's right.
several months ago. He's a good dude, and I wanted to have you on because you're like I don't want to age you and say the grandfather of founder-led
I
sales. I
don't
mean, I
know,
think you.
man. I was like my 8-year-old was just giving me a hard time for the gray in my beard the other day. I don't know if I need to trim it or dye it or what. This is what startups do to you, man.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you coined. You coin the phrase? Did I get that right, or you at least were early adopter of founder-led sales?
I don't know. I think like so when I wrote Founding Sales, gosh, at this point like a decade ago, or at least started, because I started writing Founding Sales right after my last software company was acquired. I don't really think that that was like a terminology that was like kind of running around, right? And I needed something to define. Essentially, it was like Steve Blank, right, who's the author of Four Steps to the Epiphany, now known as the Startup Owner's Manual, always had the joke that like startups couldn't scale without having fired their first VP of sales. And so I needed something that like contrasted to that, like the traditional conception of like, all right, nerd, out of the way. Here come the adults, right?
Right.
And of course that would be like a professionalized sales leadership or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, so like, the founder led version of that, which is not just like a founder managing sales reps, but instead like a founder doing the initial selling, proving the repeatable, like deriving and figuring out the repeatable sales motion, and then bringing on sales reps. Like the encapsulation of that needed to be something that like kind of people could get, and founder led sales kind of felt like that. And so it seems like in the last 10 years it's really come to be like the terminology that people landed on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then of course Founding Sales is the book which encapsulates all that.
Yeah. What made you want to start a podcast?
Oh, so it's a good question. So yeah, I started a new podcast called Founder Led Sales Stories. And I think the reason why is so Founding Sales, my book, which I should have a copy here so I could be like, this guy, right? It's funny. People kind of they give me a hard time about it because they're like, man, this thing's like kind of a textbook. And I'm like, yeah, it was written to be a textbook. It's not like a page turner. It's not like
Right.
an airport, an airport bookstore sort of thing, or like a bunch of blog posts that's been like stitched together in a book. But on the flip side, so like that's cool. But on the flip side, I think there's a lot to be said for kind of case studies
Yeah.
and stories and narrative, and just seeing. And this is like how people oftentimes learn on top of like a formalized curriculum. And so one of the things I work with founders a lot, and on their founder led sales motions, and just like the cross pollination can really be powerful, where someone who's got a sales motion, like let's use like Granicus as an example, right? Like someone selling a government tech, selling gov tech to local governments, but maybe instead of it being a procurement software, it's instead um, uh, it's instead like law enforcement or what have you.
Right.
But there's still things you could learn. Like
For
if
sure.
you were someone who had a startup who was selling, to the government, or even if you were selling to like maybe education, right? Like local public schools or local or even like local institutions or whatever. These things have a tendency the sales motions have a tendency to rhyme. And so if what you could do is you could chronicle a bunch of these kind of founder-led sales journeys in the form of interviewing founders who have been through the first, like, it's 2 years or 3 years, and they've exited that journey, and now they're like, maybe they have like 3 reps or 10 reps or 50 reps or whatever, but that period that they have gone through and they've like taken their lumps on, encapsulated and then shared with other folks, could really be powerful. And so that's the idea behind founder-led sales stories.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. I mean, I think obviously a lot of, from my sales career, right? You get advice from people as you're learning the ropes, and then as you start learning it and get experience, right, you're giving it down to others. But just that, like, the whole advice thing doesn't work because it's not an apples to apples, to your point. But like you said, like, yeah, if you're selling public sector, well, you have, fiscal budget cycles. There's, sometimes, a lot of times there's committees or councils that have to approve it. And there's dates that, it's different than the private sector where someone can
Oh
just
yeah.
get signed tomorrow, right? So there's some different parameters, but yeah, that's where some of those stories could really help people, learn, and you take
Yep.
one or two things and like, oh yeah, let me help, see if that helps me for my business. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and then the intention is that over time, I think I've done like a half dozen of it at this point, but like if you can get to the point where you have this substantial library of these various sales motions, you can imagine a founder showing up and listening to, the 10 that are most applicable to them, right? So like, maybe it's like high average selling price, like a bunch of high average selling price ones with a bunch of public sector ones, right? And so they listen to 5 of these, listen to 5 of these, and like, ta-da! Like now you've jumped forward ahead, and people like it so far. Like I said, I've only done half dozen or so.
Hey, most people stop after like 3, so you've already eclipsed the average, I think so.
Yeah, well, the guests like it too, which I think is important. I think it's like mildly cathartic for them, where they're just like, oh my god, here's all this dumb stuff that I've done. It's like, yeah, man, fire away. Yeah. You're gonna be saving other people heartache by sharing your mistakes.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, dude. I'm congrats on starting that. I know that, I mean, obviously a podcast, you're on one, right? It's a big endeavor. There's a lot of, legs to it. But it's just about, like anything else, is you put the time and effort, consistency over time, and you don't know what's going to happen to it. But, at least what you're sharing, I mean, those stories, I mean, just like you, I talk to a lot of founders, a lot of folks that are just struggling from a sales side, like anything to give them some even confidence, like, I can do this. Okay. Other people have similar challenges. I think it's huge. Yeah. Kudos to you on that. All right, we're going to get more into the founder-led sales. Let's go the tradition on the podcast.
Oh boy.
Yep. Here we go. Rapid fire, and we might ask a couple questions in the back end of these. I don't know what these questions are going to be, so here we go. What's a mindset shift that changed your life? What's a mindset shift that changed your life?
I'm going to connect this to founder-led sales. I think one of the things that is a big mindset shift when you're going from being a non-seller to a seller is the notion of changing from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. And, and it's funny, the first chapter of founding sales is literally called sales mindset changes, because when you go from being like a product manager or like maybe a designer or consultant, whatever, usually like you have a thing that you're working on, whether it's a feature or maybe it's maybe it's like in school, it's like an essay or a project or whatever. And there's only one, and you better not screw it up. And so I think we kind of come up in that environment where we're just like, oh man, this thing has to be perfect. And so it's like a very scarce mindset. And so what it does is it leads to procrastination, and it leads to people kind of like clenching. Whereas in sales, one of the things that you quickly realize, especially in early stage sales, is that there's tons of customers out there, right? Like there's tons of fish in the sea, so to speak. And if this person doesn't have, if they don't have the need that you solve, well then first it's not even if you could convince them to buy, it wouldn't be a useful thing for them. But even if they have the need but they don't quite understand the need, or they're resistant to understanding the need, that's okay. Like that's okay. You can kind of, it's like, thank you next. I'm going to set you free, and I'm going to move on to the next.
Right.
I'm going to move on to the next prospect. And so, changing that mindset set from one of like clenching and holding on to things to being like, you know what, it's okay. I can let you go. You're gonna come back around again eventually when you recognize that you have this need. And in the meantime, there's a whole line of people that I need to get to who have the need and also recognize that they have the need.
Hmm.
And so when you kind of shift your mindset to appreciate that, all of a sudden, like it's very empowering, because rather than like clenching and procrastinating and being fearful, it's like take your best shot. Obviously, like you show up with an expectation that you're going to win this, and you
Hmm.
have like a positive mindset in that regard. But if for whatever reason it's not working, like once you get to the top of like the diminishing returns on the effort, move on to the next thing, right? Move
Yeah.
on to the next customer, like the line of people that are waiting to talk with you. So yeah, I was shifting from a scarcity to an abundance mindset. Highly impactful for me when I was first doing founder-led sales for my last software company, Talentbin. That was the one that inspired the
Yeah.
book. And then also just it's something that has really helped founders as they kind of move from being a technologist or a product person or a kind of business person generalist to like to engaging in selling behavior full
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm gonna pin that because I think we can maybe go back to that, even go deeper as we get into some a deeper topic on founder led sales. All right, let's see. Hope I dropped one. So let's go. You have a difficult business decision and only one phone a friend. Who are you making a call to?
I probably call my dad. My dad's he's a an aero he was a or he's retired now, but he's a aerospace engineer, and
Oh,
he was an entrepreneur like I am, but back in the day in Southern California in the 70s and the 80s, you didn't start software companies, you started defense companies.
mm,
And you know, he has a very methodical engineering kind of like systems mindset, which is funny. I get pegged with that a lot when people, because my background is as a business generalist is in product management and product marketing, and of course now sales leadership. And then when I talk about things, people are like, "Are you an engineer?" And I'm just like, "No, but I like play one on TV
yeah,
sometimes."
yeah,
So, having a very methodical, introspective mindset like that is very helpful when you're kind of like pairing to tackle a challenge.
mm. Do you? I mean, it's hard to potentially relate that, but do you think that's the reason maybe you run your own business now? Like you wanted to run businesses was because your dad, or do you think you kind of something rubbed off there as growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent, but I think maybe larger, it's just like the mindset of problem solving. I think usually what ends up happening is with I'll speak for myself. What drives me to like start things, right, whether it's a
Right.
company or build a product or write a book or what have you, is to identify a highly problem like a highly personally impactful problem that I feel I am well positioned to tackle, right?
Right.
And so people ask me this about the book all the time, Founding Sales. It's like, why did you write this? And I think on the one hand, I was uniquely positioned to be able to write it, having gone and moved from being a business generalist founder to being the first seller, then sales manager, then sales leader at
Right.
at Talentbin. So that, but there were probably lots of people who had done that, right? Maybe it didn't have a name, like, oh, this is
Right.
founder-led sales. There's probably
Right.
people, lots of people had done that already. But then the second thing is that I'm an author and a writer, historically as well, and so it's kind of one of those things where like I had a
Mm,
need to do it and also the capability to do it, and so it
yeah.
made sense to go and tackle it. And I think that that's kind of like it's more the when you see a problem that that is gonna bug you, right, and then
Mhm.
and then moreover you have the capability to solve it. I think that that's kind of what ends up kind of driving folks to address a lot of these things, at least me.
Yeah. That's it. No, that's a good point. I think you're spot on with that. All right. Number three. Ah. What's your next just get started moment? Anything you are secretly working on?
Ooh, can it be something that I just got started
Sure.
on?
Yeah, sure.
Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
Let's
don't be
yeah.
mad at me.
No,
Yeah,
that's
it's
fine,
kind
man.
of related to so one of the things that I really struggled with over the last 5 years in running my current software company was this. What I observed was kind of a decline or degradation in the comprehension, like the comprehension of junior staff of just like business acumen, right? Just like how businesses work, what kind of execute, like what high quality and high quantity execution looks like. Just kind of like things that are really basic, and that anyone who, if um, someone who's my age or had maybe come up in business in the the early 2000s or the 2010s or what have you would have said like, oh yeah, no duh. And so as I was trying to think through like, where is this kind of like deficit in like business acumen coming from? I think there's a couple of things that are driving it. One, I think folks who are kind of like new grads coming out of college these days. One, the the kind of the number of people that have kind of high school like jobs, if you
Hmm.
will, it's like declined like precipitously.
Oh,
Um,
I agree. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I've been
well,
talking
it's
about
just
this a
like,
lot recently. Like no one
oh,
gets a job. Well, just because like I grew up like maybe the same with you. Like I had a paper out when I was 11 and a half, and I worked all the way through high school. And you kind of learn like those dirty jobs, the grunt
it's like
work,
the
like
basic
learn.
stuff.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
but you also learn like how to what I think the big thing is the social awareness, like how to greet
sure.
someone, right? How to be respectful and listen, like things like that that you don't pick up maybe at home all the time,
Yeah,
or
lots of
even in
stuff around the
school.
edges, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
business as like a gymnasium, if you
yeah,
will, for doing lots of like little micro anyway.
yeah. That's a
So
good
I think
point.
that
Yeah,
like the decline in that, I think, and there's a number of reasons why that's the case. I think um, as colleges have gotten more competitive and what have you, people of course, redirect a lot of their time to extracurriculars and what have you. Um, but anyway, I think another kind of component of it is that a lot of folks, parents, a lot of new grads, parents are more prone to have like white collar kind of like knowledge working jobs,
yeah,
because as the economy of the United States has become more of a service economy over the last like 20 30 years, the the folks who grew up in that environment, they see their mom or their dad who are essentially like, the things that they do is email and slides and
right,
spreadsheets and so on and
right,
so
right, right,
forth,
right,
as
right.
opposed to
That's
like
fair.
running
Yeah,
the restaurant or like
yeah,
roofing or what have you.
yeah.
Anyway, all this is to say that so what I wanted to do, because founding sales is written as so I wrote a book on it, but instead of it being like a like formal business book or like economics book or whatever, it was a children's book.
Mm,
um, and it's written as a narrative, and it has pictures in it. And it's like, I mean, sorry, it's not like a children's book. It's kind of like a young adult book, kind of like,
okay,
the Hardy Boys, or
okay,
like, R.L. Stein Goosebumps. I'm trying to like, contextualize it for people who might be of different generations. But yeah, it ended up being around 200 pages. It's called Michael's Hot Dog Stand, and it's about this kid, Michael, who's named after my son, who starts a hot dog stand in a park. And he doesn't start with a hot dog stand. He essentially starts with an observation that he's at the park and he's playing frisbee with his dad, me, and recognizes that he's hungry and he doesn't have something, like there's nothing to eat. And he's like, man, it would really be great if there was like a snack bar in here. And then he just kind of like, he does the minimum viable version of that, which is
yeah,
like goes back to the
got it.
house and like grabs a bunch of granola bars and then goes back to the park and then like, slangs some granola bars and recognizes that people actually have need. And then he starts doubling down. And it ended up being around like 200 pages. Again, it's like a young adult book, so it's
Yeah,
not like dense or whatever, but I was able to knock it out. And I like wrote it with the assistance of Anthropic's Claude large language model.
Hmm.
So I didn't write the whole thing. I was able to like map out the plot and then like kind of go back and forth, like vibe write, as I like to call it,
Yeah.
and then use AI to generate the images as well. But what would have otherwise I would have never written, never sat down to write the thing. It instead probably took me like, I don't know, like 20 hours all in, like tuning it up. And so now it's on Amazon because
Nice.
I just was able to get it up. And so I've been handing them out to a bunch of dads, moms and dads of kids who are my sons. My son's 8, and people just love it, right? Because I think a lot of folks have had this felt need of their kids being
Yeah.
very distant from commerce, um, which kind of leads to all sorts of downsides. So anyway, all this is to say that, like, in this case, just getting started was, man, I want to do this thing, and you know what? I'm just gonna start vibe writing this children's book, and like lo and behold, and I started kind of not dissimilar to Founding Sales, where Founding Sales started out as a Google Doc that I was just like writing in, and then people would
Yeah.
come to it as it was extending. Um, that as I started sharing with people, people were like, "This is amazing," and I was only like 3 chapters into Michael's hot dog stand, and so eventually I took it all the way and got it all bundled up, and people seem to really like it. So
Oh, that's awesome.
anyway, just get started, right?
Dude, I gotta get a copy for my son. He's 13, but it'd be yeah, certainly I think anytime you can again share those stories with younger folks, and again, you have to do it in a certain way where, yeah, they're not gonna read the encyclopedia probably, but being able to do it where it's a fun story and a narrative, oh my God, that's massive. So yeah, kudos to you, man. That's awesome. Good stuff. Um,
I'll send one for your kid.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm sure he'll enjoy it because he's a little like he started his own YouTube channel. Like
Oh wow.
it's really interesting. He loves video production and making his stuff. So like it's kind
Hmm.
of cool to see to see how they take ownership of it. Like you might have seen with your
Hmm.
son. So all right, what's one fear you've never fully shaken, and how do you work around it?
I think the thing that when you're running a software company, you're always worried that there's like something that you're forgetting,
Mm,
um, and that there's something that potentially could trip up what you're working on, because you try to control the controllables, but then there's like all the things that you don't necessarily, the unknown unknowns, if you will.
yeah.
um, and so I think the way of contending with that, I guess it's kind of like the abundance mindset. It's
Mhm.
related to the abundance mindset concept, where I think the important thing is just to make sure that to not go beyond diminishing returns, if you will, and recognize that there's kind of an opportunity cost to kind of like perseverating on decisions or what have you. I guess it's kind of like the just get started sort of thing. So I think that that's something that Andy Grove wrote the book Only the Paranoid Survive, and I think that paranoia and like fear of something that you forgot or like you're not thinking about is important and healthy, but not to the extent that it gates you from taking whatever action needs to happen next, because especially in early stage companies, like nothing happens unless you do it. There is no momentum.
Yeah.
And so making sure that you're not gating yourself on taking action because you're so perseverating on potential concerns is super important.
Okay. But it's something you kind of deal with often, you're saying, or at least you think about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that like you just have to, kind of recurringly remind yourself, like, oh, I'm doing it again.
Yeah.
I'm doing it again. Time to move on,
Well, I
right?
think that's a standard of growth, right? Is the fact that the self awareness is there now than maybe before. It took a while, a couple knocks in the head to actually, come to fruition there.
A couple. I don't think I have it fully recognized, but yes, exactly, right. We
Yeah.
these are the lessons that we continually relearn.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. Last one here. Can you share a light bulb moment that changed your trajectory?
Light bulb moment that changed my trajectory. I think probably one of the related to the kind of primary topic we're talking about today, the founder-led sales. We were having this board meeting for um, my software company, TalentVin, my last one, and we were talking about a, um, I was doing founder sales, and I had closed a bunch of customers. The customers were successful. Um, I think I had an SDR. I think I had two AEs, and like things were going fine. They were going okay. And so what we were talking about in the board meeting was the notion of sales hiring, of like hiring a sales manager, or a sales leader to kind of take over for me. And and we weren't like super happy with the candidates that we were getting, et cetera. And we were actually kind of at an important linchpin, or kind of like time period for the business around crossing some important revenue thresholds. And so the one of the investors at the time said, "Why don't you just keep running sales?"
Mhm.
And um, and we kind of like, it was kind of one of those things like, yeah, actually, why not? Because I am,
Right.
and we've done the hard part, which was figuring out the sales motion,
Hmm.
and then we did the second hard part, which was onboarding a couple reps and then getting the sales motion into their brain.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like beyond some of the hardest parts here. And so why not add, another two reps and then another two reps, and essentially carry this through another 2 to 4 quarters, and get that really humming before bringing on essentially like not just solidify the sales motion, which had already been solidified, but solidify the sales management motion, right? Or at least the baby version of the sales management motion, such that that is at least a kind of a snowball rolling downhill
Hmm.
when the sales leader comes on board. And it was kind of like a, yeah, actually, why not? And then when we went and did it, it was very successful. And so not only did that kind of edify the notion of like founder-led sales, but not just founder-led sales as in you doing the initial selling and then you bringing on an initial seller, but then following that through to the point at which you now again start hitting diminishing returns, which usually at that stage is when you get to 4 to 6 reps that are under the founder sales leader at that point. That's like really the point at which like you
Yeah.
know your entire like the entirety of your work is kind of consumed, or your work hours is consumed by that, and like that really makes. And so that was something where it was like, yeah, it was a very impactful light bulb moment, because not only was it impactful for the organization, it was also impactful for the kind of the extension of the concept of founder-led sales beyond just doing the sales motion yourself, but also managing the sellers as well.
Mm. Yeah. I could see that. I think that's a good discussion because you can waste so much time trying to hire the right person when it's like,
Mhm.
hey, right under our nose, maybe the right person's here sometimes,
Right.
at least for
and
the
and
time being. Yeah.
yeah, and that's essentially what it was. It's like the time being
Yeah.
is the thing, right? Where the observation was, hey, this is a high risk decision, and we don't have the bird in hand here versus two in the bush. So rolling forward with this, not forever,
Mhm.
but through these important revenue milestones, could be a expected value positive, like a high EV positive approach, versus stopping everything and focusing on hiring that person
Mm.
right then and there.
And maybe this is a good jump off point for a little deeper discussion on the founder led sales side of things because I get asked this a lot. I'm actually curious your experience, what you
Mhm.
suggest to folks when when a founder says, "When should I hire my first sales hire?"
Mhm.
Is there a metric they should be doing, a revenue
Totally.
number? What do
Mhm.
you feel is like the spot for the jump off there?
Mhm. Yeah, it's so it again comes back to the notion of like diminishing returns and the S curves,
Mhm.
right? So because startups, just like technologies in general, they're just like a series of nested S curves, right? So when you get to the top of the S curve, you want to get on a new S curve, right? Where you're, and by being constantly on the steep part of the S curve, that's where growth comes. So as an example, the first S curve that you're on as a founder seller is figuring out if the market has the need for the thing, right? What the need is in the market that you're solving, right? And then once you've figured that out, then it's a question of, can you build something to solve that need in the market, and does it resolve that need,
Hmm.
right? So that's a new stage that you're working on. And then the next stage that is related to that second stage is, can you get somebody to give you money in exchange for that? And those three kind of like work together in a loop, where if someone has substantial need and you have a hypothesis that you can build something in order to solve it for them,
Right.
then are they willing to pay for that,
Yeah.
even if
Right.
you haven't built it yet? Well, if they're not, maybe their need actually isn't very substantial. If they are, right, sight unseen, or at least in like credible, a credible narrative, then like you actually have something substantial that, to go after. And so the next step, of course, is, okay, then can we repeatedly find someone in the market who has this need, for the thing that we have built that we know solves the need of these other folks that have the same need? Can we reliably go into the market and find people who have that same need again and again and again and again, and then present to them? And that's essentially sales motion,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah.
evolution or iteration or like refinement or what have you. And so when you get to the point where um, you can do that reliably, right? And so usually the metrical way that you indicate that is, one, I can fill my calendar with these people, right? I know where to go find them. I know what to say to them in order to get their attention. Uh, I can get them on the calendar. I can have a meeting with them where I validate that they have the need that we solve, and that they believe that,
Hmm.
and that when I present what we have in order to resolve that need, they believe it,
Right.
right? They believe it.
Mhm.
They think they agree. They think that the thing that we're selling makes sense for them, and they're willing. And then they think that the economic exchange is a good deal, right? Is
Right.
a good is a
Right.
good bet. Once we get to that point, and so usually the kind of metrical version of that is, if you get to, a 20% win rate, or a 15 or a 20 or a 25% win rate, where, you know uh, 2 out of 10 first meetings are wins,
Hmm.
it's usually pretty good, right? And of course, like, that changes depending on
Sure.
the economic intensity of the average selling price, or what have you. But like, that's a good rule of thumb. And so if you're in that situation where, if I hand you 10 at bats, you get 2 base hits or 3 base hits or what have you. Well, now probably the thing that makes sense to do is to prove that I can bring someone else on who can also sell as effectively as that. And so, because now what we've done is we've created the recipe, the sales motion. Like, we've concocted the recipe. It works. People like it. They like we're able to. And so now what we have to prove is that someone else other than me can follow that recipe, because that's the first step on the way to many of those folks following that recipe. And so essentially what I'm saying is, when you get to the top of the S curve there of, okay, cool, like, I'm actually not improving my win rate meaningfully as a founder seller. I'm at the point where I'm just kind of like turning the crank. Awesome. Now what I should do is I should jump onto the next S curve, which is proving that I can bring someone on,
Right.
put the recipe into their brain, and then they can successfully do this as well.
Yeah, because I find that the found like I remember I worked for a startup. This is one of my first sales roles, and
Mm-hmm.
Rob and Mary Beth that started the company, still my mentors today. Unbelievable. But like I remember, like I'd go into a room at Rob, and you have the founder in there, and like the vision and the passion coming out of
Mm-hmm.
him, and like he could sell this thing, and I'm like, cool, but like you got to make sure the sales reps could also have that same, they
That's
like, because
right.
I think that's one of the things. It's like, if
Mm-hmm.
to your point, is like the founder might be able to do it because it's like, well, they're the ones that built the damn thing.
Yeah, and
It's
it's in their
yeah.
and if it's in their brain, but they can't get it into somebody else's brain.
Right. Right. That's a big challenge, is that leap.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
always see
and
this
and,
on.
and you got to
Oh, go
do
ahead.
it. You got to figure it out. That's the path to scale. Is that right? Like, if you can sell, if the founder can sell at a 30% or 40% win rate, but somehow they can't get that into the brain of somebody else, whether that's like collateralizing it and making sure that the discovery questions are documented, or the the sales pitch and the script and the deck and the demo script, et cetera, is something that someone else can do. That's going to be a barrier to scale.
Yeah. This is maybe more, and I guess we'll take the sales since we're talking about it, but more of a hiring question. I'm just kind of, again, going scatterbrain now that we're talking about it, like, oh, this is intriguing maybe to some. Whether it's one founder or their co-founders, a few, how that first hire a lot of times is that sales rep, that first sales rep to kind of start selling and moving it. How do they interview for that position? How do they make sure they get the right person? Because if they don't have a lot of sales background, right?
Mm-hmm.
They haven't been in a lot of organizations. They don't understand like the nuance of sales. How do they actually hire for that position?
Yeah. So I think that um, again, assuming that this is like an early stage company,
Yeah.
and usually what I talk about this in the sales hiring chapter of Founding Sales. One, I think that looking for people who have done it recently, right? So not hiring like oftentimes people say, I need to, like, you've done founder selling, and then sometimes people will say, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hire a sales leader, right?
Mhm.
Well, the problem with that is that by hiring a sales leader, usually that person is oftentimes very distant from the behavior of selling. Right? They
Yeah.
haven't sold in a second, um, and and so now what you have to do is they have to kind of relearn or wake up how to sell, and pick up this sales motion from the founder, like essentially take that recipe and have it poured into their head. And so that's essentially two risks there that
Right.
are kind of like nested, versus um, taking a sales rep who's has some tenure, right, not somebody who's like super fresh, from a similarly, maybe like what I like to say is the cohort before your startup. So the example I like to use is, the usually startups kind of come in waves, and so if you're, let's say you were Rippling, right? You sell payroll and HRS software, or actually a good example is a payroll company called Warp. My buddy runs them. They're this great payroll company that's focused, has very clear ICP. They are focused on payroll and compliance for startups.
Mhm.
That's it,
Right.
right? And so they've done a bunch of founders selling themselves, and then the reps that they've hired are folks who historically sold kind of like finance products to early stage startups. So like
I see.
Brex, right?
Right. Right.
It does
Okay.
Brex sell payroll? No, it doesn't sell payroll, but it sells financial tooling to early stage companies, um, on a pay as you go kind of basis, not a contract basis. So the sales motions are fairly similar, right?
And they
And
understand that they understand the like the main decision makers. They understand a lot of
yeah,
similar players, buyers, and stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah, so like sales motion familiarity, which is what you're describing, or
Yeah.
like sales motion comfort, and then also stage comfort as well. So like this, use Warp as another example. If you were to go and if they were to go and hire a seller from, like, I don't know, Gusto, right, or ADP,
Mhm. Right.
right? Like, Gusto's a 5,000 person company at this point, and so someone who's a sales rep at Gusto, I'm sure they're lovely, but they're used to a certain level of rigor and process
Mhm.
and
Right.
support,
Right.
like materials and systems and so on and so forth, versus someone who was, a seller at Brex starting 4 years ago, when maybe there were a dozen sellers or what have you, and like everything's falling apart and everything's broken, and there's no sales deck, et cetera, et cetera. That, and then they go through the process of from that early stage period to a more mature period. And so now what you can do is you can grab that person and bring them back into an early stage run again in what that has sales motion similarity and
Right.
also stage similarity, and they're going to be more prone to have success
Okay.
there. So like that's like
Yeah.
those would be some of the characteristics you'd look for. There's all sorts of other characteristics as well. Like you need people who are curious and intelligent and are comfortable with like uncertainty and kind of chaos, which I think is kind of related to this stage
Yeah.
stage familiarity there. But those are all the sort of things that you need in an early stage kind of first sales hire. But what you're not doing is you're not hiring someone to concoct your sales motion,
Right.
right? That's the purpose of founder-led sales, and like that's the responsibility of the founder. And so that's the no-no is hiring someone hoping, crossing your fingers and hoping against hope that they're gonna figure out your commercial motion
Right.
for you,
Yeah.
because that's just that's the recipe for disaster. So it's not
Yeah.
that, right? It's not that. That's your job as a founder, but it's also not hiring, the the very senior sales leader or the super tenured sales rep out of the Series E or public company that has like no overlap with and no familiarity with your stage, even if they maybe have a similar sales motion,
Yeah.
like we were saying with ADP and Warp.
Yeah. Good point. Well, and it kind of wrapped that up. I mean, really, the big point is like if the founder doesn't put that motion together, if they don't have a written
Mm-hmm.
documentation, they don't know what to do. It's almost not worthless. It probably isn't worthless, but it could be
It's
close to
very
worthless
risky.
because
Very
it's risky.
risky.
Yeah, you might have
Mm-hmm.
that person come in. They're like, "What the hell did I get myself into?" And they're out 3 to
Yeah.
6 months, and now you're hiring again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in general, most sales reps are the thing that they're great at is managing 30 concurrent conversations and remembering every single, the details associated with those 10 or 20 or 30 live opportunities that they have, the forming relationships and being charismatic and being a really good communicator, and also like understanding the political interactions of the people that you're selling to. Those are all the things that sales reps are really fantastic at. Um, the kind of concocting a sales motion from zero is not really a behavior that most sales reps have had to do.
Yeah.
Some may be capable of it, but it's usually what sellers are great at is they're great at being high activity, great communicators, great political like animals, really good at reading the room, as compared to like kind of like taking something from zero and making it into something non-zero when it comes to selling. There are some subgenres of reps that do have that capability. The terminology that Stephanie Friedman likes to use for it is like a pioneer seller. But those are kind of like harder to sniff out, kind of fewer and farther between. And so this is why like the high probability approach for founders to do this is to just do the founder selling themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. You mentioned scarcity
Mm-hmm.
earlier, and kind of maybe that's a negative. You don't want that. You want the abundance.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other blind spots that founders typically have when it comes to selling?
Oh man, it's a ton, right? I think that it's kind of related to the scarcity mindset. It's being perfectionistic. Um, so thinking that they need to, before they're like the email needs to be perfect, 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 perfect
Right.
before they send it. And
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
spend like a half hour sending the email versus like, geez, man, could have sent like 10 emails in the time you've been
Yeah.
like perseverating on this one email. That So that's one. Um, Being direct, right? Like beating around the bush instead of saying like, so Brian, is this a priority? Because if it's not, like, I still like you, right?
Yeah.
Like, and
Right.
like we can still be friends, but this isn't a priority, and you don't think that you have this need. Like, it's cool. Like, let's not waste each other. That feels to people like, oh my gosh, I'm being so direct. Um, I mean, there's just like, there's oodles and oodles and oodles of these things. It's the entire first chapter in Founding Sales is all
Yeah.
these. It's got related to the one about overthinking or being a perfectionist is just not appreciating the impact of scale and activity.
Yeah.
Um,
Good point.
of just like, yeah, turns out like you need to be having 10 to 15 customer facing meetings a week, and you're not going to have like, because unfortunately you're not going to know if you have a 20% or a 30% win rate. That's really good. That still means that 70% of
Yeah.
your meetings are zeros, right?
Yeah.
So you still have to kiss a lot of frogs in order to get any princes out of them, because if you're going to just, you know, if you're going to be very very intentional and thoughtful and overthink all these things, you're never going to get to the point where you're going to have enough volume to drive
Yeah.
drive the economic outcomes that you're looking for.
Well, and the point that I think is really important to hammer home is, and let's use that 20% win rate, right? So let's say it's 20%, whatever that, winning, one out of five,
Mhm.
and that's if you're good, right? I think in the
Yeah,
competitive
I mean
market,
that's
right,
like
it could
that's
be
pretty
it's
solid.
20% is really good, right? So, but let's
Yeah.
use that. I think a lot of founders struggle with thinking like, okay, well, again, whatever number, I don't know whatever goal they have, they're like, oh, my pipeline, I have these 4 deals in. Well, they don't realize you really want 3 to 4x,
Mhm.
right? Pipeline coverage to be able to hit that number, because to your point, you're not going to win them all. Things are going to push
Nope.
out to the next quarter.
Mhm.
Priorities change. Like, and I think, yeah, having that like mindset of like, oh, let me just win one, or let me do a couple activities. It's like, no,
Mhm.
you have to have more of an inflated
Mhm.
pipeline to be able to have coverage, which I think a lot fall short.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that kind of so much of this stuff is just being comfortable with like non-perfection, kind of like being like messiness. And so in order to admit that only 20% of your deals are gonna win, you literally have to admit to yourself that you're gonna like 80% of them are not,
Mm-hmm.
which
Right.
sounds like, that's like an F minus. Right?
Right.
If you look at it from the standpoint, like, what do you mean? I'm going to get a 2 out of 10 questions
Yeah.
right on this quiz? That's like awful,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, no, no, no. Right? What we're doing here is, if you only if you only have 10 questions, right? If you only have 10 questions, and those are only 10 questions you're allowed to have, then yes, that would be problematic. But the reality is that we have this whole market that we should be going after, and we
Right.
just want to go through it, right?
Right.
And so if it turns out that this person like doesn't have need, or like, as we said, like does have need but doesn't recognize it, it's kind of like, okay, thank you, next,
Yeah.
right? We can move on there, and it's not like you're getting a bad grade. What you're doing is you're getting past that person to the person that actually does have the need and is going to recognize it, right?
Yeah. And as you're saying that, the word that comes to mind is focus. I find tell me if you agree with this. Too many folks, um, they want to go after every industry because there's abundance. You just said it, right? There's a lot of, but
Yeah.
it's like, hold on though. If you, because my thing is always like, okay, let's say they have 3 clients, they're trying to build their business. If 2 of the 3 clients are like whatever, like financial services, why are you going after like whatever hotels? Go
Yeah,
after
exactly.
financial services. Go at
That's
like
right.
you know what I'm saying, right? Do you agree with
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
Yeah.
totally, right? And it's usually the initial addressable market, this, you want to be as narrow as possible on that ideal customer profile. And this is funny, like, when I talk with founders and I say, like, what's ideal customer profile for you? And then usually what they'll do is they'll throw out a minimum bar,
Yeah.
right? They'll be like, oh, use Atrium. So we make sales analytics software. If if you said to me, what's your ideal customer profile? The wrong answer would be, well, we can work, anytime there's a can, right? Like, we can work with
Yeah.
organizations that have as little as 10 account executives all the way up to 1,000. And then if I were then to yell at you and say that doesn't sound very ideal. Like, what's ideal? Like, what's a sick customer fastball
Yeah.
down the pipe? I would say, oh, well, in that case, yeah, you probably want to have like 50 to 100 sellers. Usually, what that means is that there's going to be anywhere from 5 to 8 sales managers, and there's at least a second line of sales leadership. right?
Right.
So there's two levels of sales leadership,
Mhm.
which means that the frontline managers, the VP of sales can't have visibility across all of their sellers. They need to measure performance metrically, and they have to enable their managers to measure as well. And usually there's a sales operations function that has a little bit of that can help out as well, but not a huge sales operations function. That's where we crush it. And so then you say, great, that is ideal customer profile right there. Let's go find more of those folks and then get in touch with them. Um, because as my friend Rob Snyder says, what we're looking to do is we have these success stories where it's like,
Right.
hey, we started with this organization, they had 80 sellers, they had a really underpowered revenue operations team, they had some pretty lightweight analytics in place, um, from an overloaded BI team. And then when they deployed Atrium, all of a sudden, all the sales managers were able to have all the performance analytics they needed in order to measure the performance of the reps and upskill them and so on and so forth. And as a result, the organization raised win rates by 5 points across the team and raised customer facing meeting volume by 20%, and ultimately bookings went up by this. Whoa, that's an amazing success story. Great. Yeah, like let's go find more organizations
Right.
that look exactly like that versus, hey, well, these guys have 10 reps. Should we take the meeting?
Right. Yeah. And I think, I mean, that's something, hopefully anyone that's listening to this, I mean, if you have any takeaway, it's that right there. It's like, that's why if you have, whatever, you have 10 or 20 clients, you're early on, sending a case study for a client that's so different than the one that you're talking with, like to your point, the 10 reps versus 1,000. Well, the 1,000 rep case study doesn't make the 10 rep one is like, that you don't know my business.
Mhm.
They're not the right fit then. Like, you have to make it relatable. So going after the same sort of market, just to underscore that, I think is massively
Yeah, you,
important
you
early on.
yeah, you wanna focus as much as possible, you know?
Yeah. Um, we can go all day on this, and I'm just like, oh my god, I'm jacked up. I wish I could talk to you longer. Maybe we'll come back. We'll do a part two at some point if you're game for that, and just and talk through this. Um, where can everyone say hello to you? Where do you spend your time online? Where's all the
I'm easy
details?
to find on both Twitter and LinkedIn. So I'm the only Peter Kazanjy in the United States, and then if you
Oh,
go and you just type the closest approximation of that into Google, it'll autocorrect you for the misspelling. So
yeah,
did you mean Peter Kazanjy? So I'm easy to find on those places.
wonderful. Pete, thanks so much, man. This was a lot of fun. Time goes by so quick, and I wish we had more of it, but I appreciate you. Thanks so much.
It was awesome, Brian. Thanks for the time.